It's an honor to be here speaking to all of you about one of my absolute favorite subjects and one of the biggest joys of my life, which was teaching outdoor education. Like Tamas said, I'm currently working in the policy space at Tier Mobility, but this is all towards my goal of increasing the amount of urban green space, increasing the more time people spend outside, so advocating for more micromobility, getting people out of the cars, having more livable and walkable cities. So I'm going to get my presentation started here. Okay, can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay, great. So actually, I have different of having good and terrible weather, Chicago, Florida, Jamaica, and Germany. Here you can see some of my pre-K German students at our community garden where they participated. And this was actually an activity where they would gather natural materials to make a castle for our garden queens who would keep an eye on our gardens when we weren't there. And you can see it's very active, immersive. They're allowed to get dirty, stand in the dirt, you know, pick up rocks, pick up sticks, pick flowers, and make the design whatever they want it to be. So that all goes to the theme of immersion and adventure. We want to make sure our outdoor education really gets children and adults in those spaces, touching those materials, interacting with the natural environment, and having something exciting and motivating to do. Franca and Tamas did a great job talking about the benefits of being in nature, and those benefits are directly related to what you do in outdoor education as well. As they had mentioned, a growing body of evidence shows that increased exposure to natural environments helps with health and well-being, and especially in large urbanized societies who maybe have less access overall. And you know, not only what Franca said about just increasing that general sense of well-being, but reducing incidences of poor health outcomes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, asthma, hospitalizations, mental distress, of course, increasing your lifespan, and decreasing myopia in children, because we know that kids spend a lot of time on screens now, only using a couple of their senses, which you know, kind of limits the educational experience. More time spent outside increases better self-reported health and subjective well-being among adults, and then improve birth outcomes and cognitive development in children. So our outdoor education is a way for us to start early, start young, to get children comfortable in the outdoors, because that feeling of safety is extremely important, and also helping them, you know, find excitement and joy in the outdoors as well. So when you bring your lessons from the indoors to the outdoors, they are more immersive. It allows us to use all of our senses. Mostly in a traditional classroom, we have students who are only using two of their senses. You are looking and listening, kind of what we are doing with this presentation right now. I wish I could pass around things for you to smell and taste and feel, but unfortunately we're limited by this format, but we wouldn't be if we were outside. And using all of those senses makes your lessons more immersive. You can convey more information and make your activities a lot more memorable as well. Lessons can be journey-based, so you can move through a dynamic space. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that being trapped at home is not a lot of fun, reduces our quality of life and our ability to experience adventure and novelty and excitement. So having lessons that are journey-based, maybe move along a path, move through a park, or move around an outdoor space, can be much more engaging and helpful in sequencing your lessons for your students as well. So you can kind of build on the ideas you're conveying from one stop to the next along the path. And studies have shown that contact with nature improves those positive emotions, contributes to physical health because you're out there and moving, and also life satisfaction. So having that adventure, that journey, can really promote a lot of positive well-being and emotions. Outdoor education also promotes discovery, which is the constructivist learning approach, which basically means that knowledge is created between the student and the resource, with the teacher as a facilitator, rather than the teacher sort of being the central person who just pours all of their knowledge into the student. It's actually letting the students discover and learn on their own, which increases critical thinking skills, skepticism, and building in students the ability to evaluate information and find their own answers, which is so important in the world today, where we are just covered in information and misinformation coming from the internet, and our skills in evaluating the truth or falsehood in that information are being reduced. So outdoor education can help kids understand that they can construct their own knowledge, find answers, and evaluate based on their experience. The outdoor education also helps with connection. While you're out there, discovering and learning and observing, you need to talk to other people to get more information. Builds in cooperation and mutual learning as well. And of course, that excitement. You're outside, every day is different. The weather might be good, the weather might be terrible. There might be birds that day, squirrels that day, bugs that day. It's always something different. So that novelty can inspire and motivate. It helps motivate your learners to get outside, to make their own observations, and really pay attention to the world around them. I can't tell you how many students I've interacted with where there'll be, a beautiful rainbow outside that morning, and I'll ask them, did you see the rainbow on your way to class today? Not a single one. They're not looking, they're not paying attention. So they're very walled off from the world around them. So getting them to look, observe, be a part of their external space helps them get out of their own heads and really appreciate the nature and the wonder that's all around them. And that motivation part, some people might be very worried taking their students outside for behavior management reasons. Oh, they're going to get out of control. They're going to not pay attention to the lesson. But I can't tell you how motivating it is to offer children some reward or surprise at the end of the lesson for that good behavior. Maybe we'll get to plant seeds at the end of the lesson for good behavior. We'll go check on that bird nest to see if the eggs have hatched yet. So you can use a lot of what nature offers you as a behavior management strategy as well. So you can do motivation over punishment. Calming, many studies show that being in nature reduces anxiety and stress and improves focus. There's even a kind of therapy called adventure therapy, which uses contact with nature as part of a larger therapeutic technique to reduce stress and recover from trauma. And nature can act as a buffer against the negative and subjective psychological correlates of stress. So maybe, being in an enclosed space all day long can kind of increase our levels of stress. Being in a very restricted physical situation, you have to stay in your seat, you have to stay quiet, can also be very stressful for some children who are very active. So it's a great way to calm and reduce that stress and also improve focus. You will never see a more focused child when you tell them, just around the corner, there's something very, very special I want you all to experience. So let's very quietly go and see what we can find. And you'll never have a more focused group than that. Also, it's very restorative. Again, overcoming trauma, overcoming feeling like they're not fitting in a normal classroom environment. Being in the outdoors can let them see that they can learn. It's maybe just the environment that's holding them back. And again, that boosting feelings of well-being, belonging, and community with that constructivist learning approach, everybody working together to make observations, to discover new knowledge, to share with each other, can really help with a more community and cooperative focus rather than the competitive focus that's sometimes a feature of traditional classrooms. And then Franca and Tomas already talked a lot about this, but the social cohesion, a sense of place, is a sense of community. So when you're taking your students outside into a nearby green space that they may also visit with their parents, that they may also interact with other community members visiting that space, it helps them understand that they're a part of this larger community and that there are other people here that we need to interact with, keep the space clean so they can enjoy it as well. And it builds a sense of empathy also. A lot of benefits. And even one study showed that 120 minutes a week in nature was enough to boost self-reported health and well-being. And sometimes we really need an adult to show us the way. Most people who get into things like outdoor education, into bird watching, into gardening, they had a positive adult role model to show them how to enjoy the natural world and how to interact interact with it and value it. So as the teacher bringing these kids into that space, you can be that person for them, which is a really exciting opportunity. And this is all to counteract what Richard Louv famously coined as nature deficit disorder. This isn't an actual recognized disorder, but it was something he observed over his time in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, that children were spending up to 50% less time outdoors than their parents had. And this was causing what he saw as an increase in not only disconnection of caring for the natural world, but things like stress, anxiety, less feelings of connectedness with those around them, not only the natural world. And he called this that nature deficit disorder. And organization called the Children in Nature Network to try and combat this, which is a great resource for you to look at as well. He discovered that a lot of the things holding children back from experiencing nature were their parents. They were simply afraid to let them outside. They were concerned over safety, injury, especially in urban environments, fear of crime, and of course, the lure of advanced electronics. Kids weren't begging to go outside anymore. They had their computers, iPads, video games to play with. So they weren't so bored that they needed to go outside anymore, and parents were happy to keep them inside where they felt that they were safe. Also in urban settings, the loss of accessible natural surroundings where children live. So it wasn't just easy for a child to go out on their own and walk to the park. It may be very far away or through a bad neighborhood, and then less opportunities for trusted adults who may be working two jobs, have to take care of the household duties as well. So there was less time for them to spend with their children outdoors. And Richard Louv observed, this was potentially driving an increase in ADD, ADHD, stress, anxiety, obesity, and myopia as well. He wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods in 2005, and he cited that this didn't used to be a very important topic at that time. There were only about 60 studies covering children and their lack of exposure to nature and what detrimental effects that had. But by the time he wrote the book, there were up to 1,000 studies. And he cited that nature is not only nice to have, but it is a must-have for physical health and cognitive functioning, which came out of all these studies. And it's shown that as long as people feel safe, and that's a very important component, talking about resiliency, talking about expectations, how to dress, what to do out in nature, as long as they feel safe, it can lower blood pressure, stress and hormone levels, reduce nervous system arousal, enhance immune system function, and increase self-esteem, reduce anxiety, and improve mood. So if all of these things haven't convinced you to take your classes outside, I don't know what to do. One of the things I have always enjoyed is how much fun I have taking the kids outside as well. You get to experience their wonder, their delight, and their excitement at new things. And that's a very special opportunity to have also. So now that you know how great it is to take your kids outdoors and teach them, what can you teach outdoors? Absolutely anything. Any lesson, any subject, anything you can teach inside of the classroom, you can take outdoors with a little flexibility and creativity. If you want to teach fractions, you can talk about how many acorns are on a tree versus how many trees there are. If you want to teach economics, you can talk about supply and demand, the number of squirrels versus the number of acorns, even saving and banking, the squirrels that hide those acorns to save for the winter when there's less food available. You can teach creative writing, poetry, of course, natural sciences, very easy to bring outside, chemistry, physics. The outdoors has everything available to help you teach your students. There's even been a huge increase in forest schools, particularly in the United States over the last few years, where it's more and more recognized that we can take all of our lessons outside in any weather. So I'm going to give you a few simple examples. These are some things that I have done myself in the past. And these examples reflect a 2016 study in Amsterdam that noted that outdoor contexts afford less enmity, boredom, and disturbances among pupils. And teachers spoke about lessons being more vivid and children being focused more easily, which I have absolutely found throughout my 16 years of teaching outdoors. So the first example and second example, we were talking about, can we do this in small towns? Both of these photos are from my time as a Peace Corps volunteer in Jamaica. The community I worked in had 150 residents, so extremely small, but a lot of the kids really struggled with motivation to learn and learning outcomes. So we went outside. We started to teach mathematics with garden plant spacing, and this was a great way to get kids more familiar with not only the agriculture that surrounded them every day, because a lot of their community was farmers, but how to plan for their farming, plan for their garden. So here the students had to determine the amount of land area needed to plant different seeds depending on the spacing needs. And that really helps students use the knowledge they already had, like how big pumpkins are, to determine if the amount of area they calculated was correct. So if they calculated to plant 12 pumpkins in, I would ask them, well, how big is a pumpkin? So would 12 pumpkins fit in this very small area you just told me? Nope, wouldn't fit. So it helped them with critical thinking, questioning, and using their prior knowledge to help decide if something was reasonable or not. My next photo up here, the literacy with the observation journals. These are some children that had fallen very far behind in reading, but they were given the special privilege and opportunity to observe our school garden, write down and report what happened there each day so they could come and report it to the rest of the school. This encouraged them to read, write, use and learn new vocabulary, and also help them build confidence through public speaking. And the other kids who normally would treat them very poorly because they were considered, behind or dumb because they were behind in their reading, now were very envious that they got to do this activity and were very impressed by what they were able to share with the group. And that raised their social standing and confidence as well. The last example here is from Florida. This is doing chemistry with water quality samples with my students at the local aquarium. And this was actually an amazing way to get kids kind of involved in the aspect of science. And they could learn about salinity, tidal effects, pollution, pH, and biodiversity through monitoring water quality. And the students gain confidence to ask their own questions. Is the bay healthy? How can it be healthier? What conditions either increase or decrease the amount of animals I find each day or the level of salinity I see each day? So they could form and test hypotheses. They could slow down and observe the environment because it takes time to run water quality tests and collect samples. They learned how to gather baseline versus experimental data and share and report their findings to others, because it's not so important if you just find out answers, but it's important if others find out those answers as well. And students were very excited to make discoveries, very excited to learn how to run water quality tests and feel confident in running them on their own and being able to interpret the results. So nature can provide us with a lot of inspiration and also innovation, so that motivating factor as well. Many of our greatest discoveries have come from careful observation of nature, from how we design planes to those little reflective markers you see on roads. They've all come from close nature observation. Humans are naturally curious, especially children, and we can promote that instinct to provide more opportunities for reflective interaction with nature, and also promote the importance of scientific discovery through participation in citizen science, which we'll talk about next. So citizen science is basically when there are studies that scientists are running where they need a lot of data gathering, and the scientists and their staff or interns on their own don't have the capacity to gather all the data that they really need. So they rely on the public, volunteers, to gather data for them. So this is a great way to connect your students, your participants, adults or children, to the wider scientific community. They can see that what they're doing has importance and impact beyond the classroom. It's motivation through real world knowledge contribution, and it exposes especially the children to options, career options and professional networks. And these things can be as simple as weather monitoring, just writing down if it's cloudy that day or how much it rained that day. Those are important observations, especially in very specific and local sites. They can write down when flowers and trees bloom, when certain birds return from migration. Monitoring trash and invasive species is also really important for scientific discovery and management of these natural areas. There's a website on the screen here, scistarter.org, where you can find globally different citizen science projects that need your help. So you can start there if you want to get into this citizen science as well. And you can see that careful observation of nature does drive innovation. You never know what your students might discover out there. We can see Velcro being developed from seeing these hitchhiker or sticky seeds, reversible adhesive from snail slime, sonar was developed from observing whale and bat communication. So letting your students have some open-ended time to answer a question, observation time, the ability to ask, why is it like this? Or, how does this work? And letting them discover that on their own through both their observations and going to literature or asking, other adults and other scientists really helps drive that journey of discovery in a very internally motivated way. So I put a few examples to aspire to. These are some very cool and creative projects I've seen that require a bit more effort and connection, but the impact is enormous. So the first slide here, the gentleman with the bald eagle, is a program called AVA, where the Avian Veteran Alliance, where veterans suffering from depression and PTSD can walk injured birds of prey outdoors in a natural setting. And this has been hugely restorative in reducing their stress, overcoming depression, reducing their combat-induced PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, by not only being in nature, but helping one of these injured animals become more comfortable in its surroundings as well. So building that empathy, that connection. The next example, the sea turtle monitoring with families, was a great way to not only get kids out and understanding how to protect sea turtles by using only red lights, not littering on the beach, but helping them overcome the fear of night and fear of darkness, which also holds us back a lot of times from enjoying the magical things that happen in the natural world at night. And finally, we have our migratory bird studies with adults and students. So this was a project I worked with a local bird bander. That's a person that basically just puts a little numbered anklet on the birds and captures them in nets, and then puts nets in the same place every year and hopes to capture those same birds again to see how long they live, how much they grow, if they're reproducing, if they keep using the same park for conservation purposes. And you will never see more inspired and excited adults and children when you can hold, a beautiful songbird in your hand, see it as up close as these children are here, and really appreciate the fragility, but also strength and beauty of these animals up close, and then be motivated to learn more about them, take care of them, go out on your own and try and observe them with your first pair of binoculars, and support citizen science and conservation efforts like this. Really, really a lot of fun and really beautiful. So again, these are all instances of where, science and park systems and education can come together to help support, student and adult learning, and really create that close connection with the natural world. All right, so a few tips for bringing your lessons outside. Of course, we all, especially in a formal educational environment, we have to teach certain skills, reach certain goals and objectives for learning. So make sure you're focusing on the outcome. What message or skill do you want every student to gain and walk away with, and try and build your lesson in a multi-sensory and sequenced way to build up to that skill you want, and then give them an opportunity to demonstrate that skill at the end of the lesson to see if you were successful and how you can support them further. Again, making it mobile. Movement along a path can sequence your lesson and allow students to build on their knowledge. And having that movement aspect, that physical aspect to it, can help, again, reduce distractions, get out some of that energy we know kids have, and help them focus a lot more because they have a goal, they have a place to be, they have something to get to, something to reach. So it can help them be more focused and be more motivated to go through the lesson. Very important, whenever you can, leave time for that free exploration. Like I said, we discover, many products and things we use today from just careful observation of nature, but kids need a moment to have that quiet time, have that reflection time, have that individual exploration time. Even that seclusion, that solitude can be very important to help kids really deeply notice what's going on around them. One activity we used to do were called silence spots, where we would drop kids off along a trail, not too far apart, but far enough where they couldn't see the person sitting next to them. And they would have time to write in a journal anything they wanted, their observations, their feelings, their thoughts. But sometimes this was the only time these children ever experienced quiet time alone, especially if they lived in a big family, lived in an urban environment. And I can tell you they all came out calmer, quieter, and more reflective. And it was always a wonderful thing to see. And again, that free exploration, you can always answer a question. Why is it so muddy at the edge of the pond? Why is the sky cloudy today? Why do the birds nest in this tree but not in this tree? Just give them a chance to kind of answer some open-ended questions while they're out there doing their free exploration. You can use props and tools to engage and guide learners. So, of course, regular tools like magnifying glasses, shovels, books about the plants and animals that they can use as a reference. Even for some of our activities, we would have a giant leaf that we would throw little pieces of oxygen through to help them get the idea that plants release oxygen and take in carbon dioxide. So the students would have to breathe on the leaf to give it some carbon dioxide, and then we would throw the little oxygen through a hole and they would catch it. You'll never see a student remember better a lesson than when they actually have to catch the oxygen coming out of the leaf rather than just hearing about how leaves make oxygen. So those props can be really engaging, especially when you have the time and resources to make them. And that's something you can get your parents and other community members to help you build as well, which can be a lot of fun, involving them in their children's education. And one of the great things about being outside is you can use non-traditional seating arrangements. Sit in a circle, sit in a horseshoe, sit in small groups to work together instead of just the straight rows like we have in our regular classrooms, which can sometimes be very isolating, reduce collaboration, and reduce that constructivist discovery-based learning. So let the kids organize themselves in different ways to help with that cooperation and learning. And it really also helps boost the teacher's capacity to highlight facilitation as well. Because you're not just the person in front talking to everyone sitting down, you're a part of the group as well. All right, so an important note, yes, the richer and more beautiful and more inviting your spaces are, like the ones Tomas was showing, is definitely very helpful, especially for those feelings of security. But honestly, it doesn't really matter the kind of nature space you take the kids to. It can be a single beautiful tree, some wild flowers behind a building, or even the cracks in the sidewalk. All of these places can facilitate an outdoor nature exploration, lesson, adventure, and sometimes I really think it helps students, focus in and appreciate the small things. Maybe that flower growing out of the sidewalk isn't as grand as a beautiful forest preserve, but getting kids to notice the beauty that's all around them will help them increase their desire to be outside because they can experience these things, and also increase their motivation to protect and expand these green spaces as they grow. And we need to make the next generation of environmental advocates, especially in our cities, so they will vote for and provide funding for and volunteer for maintaining these green spaces. So that was a lot to share with you. I always have more to say on this topic. So please, if you ever have questions or need help with lesson planning, my email is on the screen there. I have a million ideas. Again, I've been teaching in this space for 16 years, so I'm very happy to share what I know with you and help you bring your kids more outside. Remember, we mentioned bad weather, but there is no such thing as bad weather. There is only bad clothing. So as long as your students and yourself are properly dressed and prepared for the weather, you can go outside in just about anything. And I've taken kids out in the rain, the snow, the cold, and there is still something amazing to discover out there. And it definitely builds in a little excitement as well. And at the bottom of the screen here, you see some resources. That Last Child in the Woods from Richard Louv, really great resource. Earth education is a special kind of environmental education that I used at my nature center in Chicago. Was written back in the 70s, but it was truly revolutionary for its time. So I highly recommend you check it out. And then if you want to learn more about the Avian Veteran Alliance, you can read Eagle on My Arm as well. I think that's about it for my time. Thank you all so much for letting me share with you one of my favorite subjects today. I hope you see how you can teach anything outdoors. You're able to do this no matter the kind of green space you're near, and you'll be motivated to take your learners outside as soon as possible. Thank you all so much.